Welcome to the demo of my project that I'm calling Open Fields, which is originally designed as a computer assistant to a tabletop Western RPG, originally Boot Hill, but I've added in elements of D&D and Star Wars and Twilight 2000 Top Secret SI as well. You can think of this as like an evolution of me playing with army men. Suppressing fire!
Percani! I got you, man! How you doing, Percani? They shot me in my ass, Martin! I think we lost 5 men. Can you locate? The building with the caved-in roof! Because Apollo and Bull are badasses.
Except now the army men have stats, and each one is individually created, and chance to hit is a little bit more random, and there's a little bit more of it, and there's more of a danger of my favorite army men dying. And plus, it's Boot Hill. It's Western, not Boot Hill anymore. I'm using the Civil War as a combat testing ground, basically, and as an origin story for some of the characters. This demo is being done right before I start going into graphics and sounds. So play should be almost the same. I might add some kind of cover mechanic, and I might make it a little more or a little less lethal. Let's take another look at that volley. So it's a volley of fire between 10 Union and 10 Confederate soldiers, 22 yards apart. And I put them 22 yards apart just to make it easier to see. The main colors are blue for Union and gray for the Confederacy. They turn black when they're firing, they turn red when they're hit, they turn orange when I have them selected. They have a white dot on them if they're targeted by the selected player, a red dot if they're targeted and they're being aimed at. A bold color means that they're unwounded or have light wounds. A light color means that they have moderate wounds, and very light color means that they're incapacitated, that they've been critically wounded, or that they're unconscious from a bunch of smaller wounds. So let's take a look at that volley one last time, and also note that I've slowed down the bullet speed to make it easier to see the difference between when somebody fires and when their target gets hit. So the first thing that you might notice this time is the actions are staggered, the bullets are staggered, and that's because I modify the action time based on the dexterity stat. So an action, let's say reload, takes 20 seconds, but plus or minus 26% based on, I'm going to pause this, based on the dexterity checks, so that things are staggered. Let's take a look at a character. Let's pick a character. Private Will Smith. That name was randomly picked out based on census records and a distribution, so that William comes up a lot more often than Eli, and John comes out even more often than that, and Smith happens a lot as well. I also selected the birth date, the birth year, based on Union Civil War soldier record, so the average should be about 26. The stats are pretty standard role-playing game stats. Some of these are important for this game, and some of these aren't important. You know, knowledge isn't important for this particular simulation, but I put it in for role-playing purposes or for expansions later. One of the stats that I would like to talk about is fear level, and bravery. So in this simulation, I'm having them make bravery checks, and if they're afraid, they don't run away because they're afraid, they just get nervous. Their fear level could be none, or it should be nervous, or up to panicked, and each level of fear gives them greater negative modifiers in their accuracy and their speed, so it'll slow them down. Let's take a look at someone who actually took a shot. Here's a shot by Ed. So one of the things I'd like to mention is that I have an action queue. Time is kept track of in, there's a game timer that during unpaused, game timer that keeps track of unpaused game time. And actions, like I said before, take some time. So when an action is decided upon, like someone wants to reload, then we calculate how long it'll take them to reload and put it in the action queue that at this amount of time you can complete the reload action. Each character only has one action in the action queue, but they have their own action queue that you can queue up. Oh, first I'm going to reload, then I'm going to fire, then I'm going to reload again, so that they have continuous actions. But the system only takes the one action that's in the action queue, the main action queue. Bullets have a bullet queue. I do that so that for simultaneous-ish exchanges, if one person fires slightly faster than another person, but before the bullet would hit, then that second person is not going to be affected by any kind of hit. Whether or not the bullet is going to hit is determined when the shot is taken, not when the shot hits. In the shot, we have a base chance to hit out of 200. It's basically a D20 system, but I've expanded to a D200 system because computers make that easier. And so that I could do things like range. In a lot of game systems, you'll have something like short range shots have a 0 modifier and long range shots have a -2 modifier. And so people might game that system. If they're just barely in long range, they'll take 10 steps closer and then take their shot with the no modifier. This way, it's a linear system, so you don't game the system in that way. You go get 10 feet closer, you're percentage-wise more likely to hit. So I wanted to get rid of that kind of gaming of the system. Also, a modification that I made here is that if I say here the shot will just hit, I allow a better hit if you get less than half. If you roll better than half of what you need, then I have a separate table, a center mass table, where it's more likely to hit the chest and the abdomen than the legs or even the head. And this increases the lethality if you get a really good hit. If you go down and take a look at a little bit later, this person should get hit. Reload, game pause. Oh, I paused it at that time. So if I unpause, I should resolve it. I don't know if this is the same bullet. It isn't. This is there a bunch of stuff happened. I think this is the bullet. William's bullet hit Mackie in the right leg, and Mackie is hesitating. So hesitation is another thing that I've added. If you're hit, besides taking the wound, depending on the severity of the wound, you hesitate for a small amount of time, even if it's a scratch. Say you're reloading and you get hit, it's going to take you longer than 20 seconds. And this makes it even worse to get hit because you take a slight stunning motion, which a lot of game systems have. Now, this game was created for single player play, or single character play, individual character play, not really for mass combat actions as I've done here, but this is a combat simulator to help me develop all the combat engine. So I decided to go with the Civil War. And so I also added some things like adding, for this case, orders, so I can order all the Union soldiers to target enemies or to fire at will. I also added fire at will to make it easier for me, so that this is about as low. This is the only thing close to AI this program has, where it's a brute force-ish. It just picks the closest not incapacitated target and makes that their target. And if they have no ammo, then they reload. And if they have ammo and they have a target, then they pick a target and they fire at that target, and then they cycle through that loop again until I could give them orders to cancel or something like that. But this is just the basics, at least for now, just so I could get this combat system going and so I can test it out and look at it. I also have movement, so these guys can move around. And they have different levels of movement. This guy is slow because he's been wounded, and because of his wounded, his speed has been reduced, as opposed to this guy who has no wounds and his speed is greater than that. In addition, this is just their walking speed. They can increase to a kind of a trot and also a run. And movement will affect shooting and being shot at. I also have a zoom system. You know, I mentioned before that these characters are only about, the lines are 22 yards away, which isn't realistic for like Civil War rifles. So I have zoom levels so that they can start off at 500 yards away or 400 yards away. You can have a longer range shots. And last is that there is I do have an editor. It's a character creator and unit editor. The editing doesn't really happen at like the level where you could change their name. Since it's saved in JSON, you just do that in Emacs or whatever editor you want. Instead, it creates multiple characters at once, saving me time or taking advantage of the computer to do it fast. And it also transfers characters in between factions. So you could create a bunch of player characters, you could create Confederate soldiers, Union soldiers, you could transfer player characters to the Union or to the Confederacy, or even technically you can do vice versa. But this is just to make it easier to create bunches of NPCs and PCs, but mainly to create bunches of NPCs with names, with stats, that kind of thing. And that's it for this. The next step is to improve the graphics and audio, and that might be the only step before I do another demo. I'd like to examine the lethality of this game, but some of the lethality problems may just be because I don't understand tactics rather than being because this game is too lethal. I mean, if you have 10 guys shooting at each other until everybody's dead, it's going to be lethal. At some point, somebody has to retreat, and I haven't figured that out yet. So, hopefully, you'll watch the next demo whenever I get that out, hopefully within the next 1 or 2 weeks. You can like and subscribe if you want, but it really doesn't do much because this channel is not dedicated to a single type of content, and you'll get some what you might consider to be weird stuff if you subscribe. But you could like it if you want, and but it'll be inconsistent with the number and frequency and content of releases. So that's it. Bye.